Coming in at a number 10 spot with the Fukushima nuclear power plant. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan experienced a catastrophic disaster in 2011 after a powerful earthquake and tsunami hit the region. The damage caused the cooling systems of the reactors to fail, putting them in danger of a meltdown. Although Fukushima Daini was shut down in 2 days, the Daiichi plant was not as fortunate. The disaster resulted in 3 nuclear meltdowns, explosions, and even the release of radioactive material in the surrounding areas, which resulted to the Pacific Ocean being heavily contaminated. The Fukushima disaster is considered the most significant incident of its kind and second only to our number 1 entry. The disaster had a far-reaching impact as it led to a 4-stage evacuation order, affecting thousands of people who lived nearby. Many people lost their homes and were forced to relocate due to the dangerous levels of radiation. But despite the disaster, the Japanese government continued to operate other nuclear power plants in the country. And if you look at it on a much grander scale, nuclear energy is the cleanest. Although many of you guys would like to deny that, it is. But regardless, these type of disasters is the main reason for us looking towards renewable energy sources, with Japan increasing its investment in solar, wind, and all other forms of clean energy. The aftermath of the Fukushima disaster is still being felt today. The region continues to grapple with the environmental and health impacts of the disaster, while the plant itself remains a major concern in the region. At a number 9 spot with the Hanford site. Hanford nuclear site in eastern Washington, one of the 3 sites that made up the government's covert Manhattan Project, is the most contaminated place in the United States, if not the world. The facility produced plutonium for the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Today, it is home to 56 million gallons of nuclear waste, leaking storage tanks, and contaminated soil. Hanford is an environmental disaster and a catastrophe in waiting, writes journalist Joshua Frank in his new book, Atomic Days, The Untold Story of the Most Toxic Place in America. Hanford is shrouded in secrecy, which began with the Manhattan Program, and even now, it's still very much like a covert operation because of the dangers that exist with the potential for an attack on one of the nuclear waste tanks. Hanford is also the costliest environmental project the world has ever seen. The known environmental dangers of Hanford include 177 underground tanks that hold about 56 million gallons of nuclear waste, as I mentioned before, 67 of which have been leaked in the past into groundwater that feeds into the Columbia River. Coming in at a number 8 spot, we have the elephant's foot. In 1986, a catastrophic nuclear accident occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. 8 months later, workers discovered a startling phenomenon, a black lava that had flowed from the reactor core, resembling a human-made volcano. One hardened mass in particular was particularly shocking and was nicknamed the elephant's foot because it resembled the foot of the massive mammal. The lava formation was found to be so highly radioactive that it would just take 5 minutes for a person to receive a lethal amount of exposure. The elephant's foot weighs an estimated 2.2 tons and is known as lava-like fuel containing material. It has remained a macabre object of fascination since its discovery. The elephant's foot is composed of a rare substance called corium, which is produced in a nuclear accident where nuclear fuel and parts of the reactor core structures overheat and melt, forming this weird mixture. Corium has only been formed naturally 5 times in history. Once during the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania in 1979, once at Chernobyl, and 3 times at the Fukushima Daiichi plant disaster in Japan in 2011. It's said that everyone who came in contact with the foot passed away shortly after. However, to this day, this is not confirmed. And also, there's no way of getting rid of it, so it's just laying there forever, waiting for its next victims to come across. Number 7, the Siberian Chemical Combine. The Siberian chemical compound in Seversk, Russia was established to produce weapons-grade plutonium and highly enriched uranium on a massive scale. The plant is located in a closed town, requiring access documents to be shown at every single checkpoint. The top 7 reprocessing complex at the plant was the site of one of Russia's worst nuclear accidents in 1993. During the cleaning of a tank with nitric acid, it overheated and caused a large explosion, severely radiating the plant and significantly raising levels of radioactivity in the surrounding areas. Although the facility's plutonium and uranium production capabilities were shut down after the accident, the isolated and remote plant continues to store low and intermediate levels of nuclear waste for weapons and radioactive waste. The plant's location within a closed town and the lack of oversight from government agencies raises concerns about the safety of nuclear materials stored at the site, and some say that even walking in this place for 30 to 50 minutes is enough to end your life. So just beware if you're ever in Russia for whatever reason. Number 6, we're back to Russia with Mayak, Russia. In the far-flung reaches of Russia's northeast lies the industrial complex complex of Mayak, home to a nuclear power plant that has been operating for decades. But the legacy of Mayak is far from one of progress and advancement. In fact, it has become synonymous with disaster and environmental devastation. In 1957, Mayak was the site of one of the world's worst nuclear accidents, when an explosion released up to 100 tons of radioactive waste into surrounding areas, contaminating it for decades to come. The explosion was kept under wraps by Soviet officials until the 1980s, when the true extent of the damage was finally revealed to the public. But the disaster at Mayak was not an isolated incident. Starting in the 1950s, waste from the nuclear power plant was dumped into surrounding areas and into the nearby lake Karachay, leading to the contamination of the water supply that thousands of people relied on daily. Over 400,000 people had been exposed to radiation from the plant as a result of the various serious incidents that have occurred here, including fires, deadly dust storms, you name it. The aftermath of Mayak's nuclear plant has left a legacy of environmental devastation and human suffering in the area, and it's really sad just to know that this all actually happened. In the hub for our list, we have Lake Karachay. Lake Karachay was once the most contaminated body of water on Earth due to radioactive pollution. It was located near the Mayak Production Association, which was a nuclear facility that was established in 1945 as the primary production facility for the Soviet nuclear weapons program. The plant's crude reactors were designed to create weapons-grade isotopes with little regard for safety. The contaminated waste was initially dumped into the nearby Teka River, which led to dangerously high levels of radiation in communities downriver of the plant. In 1951, the worst of the waste was diverted to Lake Karachay, and this practice continued until the 1990s. The radioactivity of the lake is both in its water and in the layer of radioactive sludge that lines the lake bed. Measurements taken by the same group of scientists found that the earth around the lake had a specific activity of 740,000 megabecquerel per kilogram. And that just by standing near the shore, you'd be exposed to a dose of 5.6 sievert per hour. The lake began to be filled and concreted over in the mid-1990s, with the project wrapping up in 2015. However, the damage had been already done, and the legacy of the catastrophe will endure for centuries. Number 4, the polygon. The vast and desolate region of modern-day Kazakhstan was once used by the Soviet Union for nuclear weapons testing. Despite being home to over 700,000 people, the area was deemed uninhabited by Soviet officials, making it the perfect location for the USSR's atomic bomb program. The nuclear site was where the USSR detonated its first nuclear bomb, marking the beginning of a dark chapter in history that saw the largest concentration of nuclear explosions ever recorded. Over a period of 40 years, from 1949 to 1989, the facility saw a staggering 456 nuclear tests as the USSR sought to flex its military might on the world stage. But the impact of the testing and its devastating effects on the environment and human health were kept under wraps from the public, with the Soviets only revealing the extent of the radiation exposure when the facility was closed down in 1991. The consequences of the Soviet Union's nuclear ambitions has been far-reaching, with an estimated 200,000 people suffering from the direct health effects of radiation exposure. The desire to destroy foreign nations has left a dark legacy of nuclear contamination hanging over the heads of those who were once citizens of the USSR. Number 3, Goiânia, Brazil. In 1987, a seemingly routine break-in at an abandoned hospital in Goiânia, Brazil ended up causing a devastating tragedy. Two robbers looking for scrap metal stumbled upon a small capsule of highly radioactive cesium chloride, which had been used in a radiotherapy device. The robbers unknowingly took the dangerous material with them, spreading the radiation throughout the entire city. Tragically, 4 people lost their lives as a result of the radiation exposure. The contamination spread very quickly, and several city blocks had been demolished due to the high levels of radiation. In total, over 300 people suffered from radioactive contamination, and radiophobia swept through the entire city. More than 100,000 people were queued to be screened for radiation exposure, fearing the worst. To combat the radiation, topsoil was removed from several contaminated sites, including schools, homes, and hospitals. Levels as high as 2 sieverts an hour were found in some locations, which is 200 times the annual dose limit for workers in the nuclear industry. It took months to decontaminate the affected areas, and even today, some parts of the city still remain contaminated. Number 2, Somalia's coast. Organized crime and nuclear waste may not seem like they go hand in hand, but in Somalia, it's a different story. Over a period of years, an Italian crime syndicate called the 'Ndrangheta allegedly loaded ships with nuclear waste and then sank them off the coast of Somalia and other developing African countries. This has contaminated the water and caused long-term damage to the environment. For background information, Somalia has been in a state of civil war for many years, which has prevented the formation of a strong government. This means that illegal dumping of nuclear waste was able to go unnoticed for many years, starting in the 1980s. Swiss and Italian companies are thought to have used the area as a dumping ground for years, and as a result, the waters surrounding the coast of Somalia are reportedly highly toxic and radioactive. The dumping has caused damage to the environment and to the people who are living in the area, with many cities and other small towns having to completely abandon their homes because of the deadly effects of radiation. There's even been rumors that the dumping is still going on, so it looks like this will pose a bigger and bigger threat as time goes by. Number 1, Chernobyl. We all knew this one was going to be on this list. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986 was one of the most devastating nuclear accidents in history. It occurred at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine and resulted from a combination of flawed reactor design and human error. The disaster led to acute radiation syndrome in at least 237 people on site. Although nobody off-site suffered from acute radiation effects, large areas of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia and beyond were contaminated in varying degrees. The Chernobyl disaster was a unique event in the history of commercial nuclear power where radiation-related facilities occurred. The reactor's design was unique, and the accident is thus of little relevance to the rest of the nuclear industry outside the Eastern Bloc. However, it has led to major changes in safety culture and industry cooperation, particularly between the East and West before the end of the Soviet Union. At our number 10 spot, we have the Phantom of the Opera. The Phantom of the Opera is a well-known legend that is closely linked to the history of the Opera Garnier in Paris. This legend originated from a fire that occurred in the Salle Pelletier, the predecessor of the Opera Garnier, in 1873. A pianist named Ernest was horribly disfigured in the fire and lost his companion as a result. Overcome with grief, he chose to isolate himself from the world and even took refuge in the basement of this place, which was still under construction at the time. Ernest spent the remainder of his life in the shadows of this building and only ate fish from the underground lake of the opera. His sorrowful cries could be heard in the background of performances, as many guests would report. After his disappearance, strange events started to occur in the Opera Garnier. For example, a machinist was found hanged, but when they did investigation, there was no rope to be found. And also, a chandelier fell during one performance, killing a spectator seated in the seat number 13. All these mysterious occurrences were attributed to the Phantom of the Opera, who is believed to still haunt the halls of the famous theater. These mysteries have captured the imaginations of many writers, including Gaston Leroux. He wrote the novel The Phantom of the Opera in 1910, which was a worldwide success and largely based on this legend. Even today, the legend continues to live on as Lodge number 5 in Opera Garnier is permanently rented by a mysterious stranger. This lodge is strategically located within the theater, allowing its occupant to see the performances but remain unseen. At our number 9 spot, we have the Beast of Gévaudan. The Beast of Gévaudan remains one of the most intriguing and mysterious legends in French history. The terror caused by this man-eating beast or beast lasted for 3 years, from 1764 all the way to 1767. The attacks took place in the Margeride Mountains of south central France and spanned over an area of 90 by 80 kilometers. Eyewitnesses reported that the beast was formidable with sharp teeth and an immense tail. The descriptions of the animal also varied widely, with some saying it was a striped hyena, while others claimed it was like a large wolf, dog, or even a wolf-dog hybrid. Regardless of its actual appearance, the Beast of Gévaudan was known for its brutal methods of attack, which often involved tearing out the throats of its victims. The Kingdom of France took threat to this beast very seriously and even devoted a significant amount of manpower and wealth to hunting this animal down. The resources of several nobles, soldiers, and royal huntsmen, and even civilians were used in the pursuit of this beast. But despite their efforts, the attacks persisted and the number of victims continued to rise. The exact number of victims is not known, but estimates suggest that the beast killed and injured hundreds of people. Although the beast was reported killed several times, the attacks did not stop until 1767. To this day, the identity of the Beast of Gévaudan remains a mystery, and its legends continue to captivate people's imaginations, and if there was really a man-eating beast in France during this time. At our number 8 spot, we have the father of cinematography. Louis Le Prince is a name that should ring a bell to all those into cinema, as he is widely regarded as the true father of cinematography. However, despite his monumental contribution to the world of motion pictures, his name is often overshadowed by figures like Thomas Edison and the Lumiere brothers. The reason for this is that Le Prince disappeared before he could showcase his groundbreaking invention to the world. In 1888, Le Prince shot the first film in history in Leeds, England. However, instead of rushing to show the world what he created, he chose to be patient and refine his invention. After 2 years of careful tweaking, he was finally ready to present his work to the public. Then in September 1890, he boarded a train to Paris with all the materials and patents he needed for the showcase. But unfortunately, he never made it to the French capital. His friends were waiting in Paris to pick him up, but they found no trace of him. This mystery sparked many rumors and theories about what could have happened to Le Prince. Some people said that his brother Albert killed him over their inheritance, while others believed that he drowned himself or just decided to fled to start a new life. But the most tantalizing theory was that Thomas Edison himself was behind Le Prince's disappearance, as he wanted to ensure his monopoly over the invention of cinema. Despite the many theories surrounding his disappearance, one thing is for certain: Louis Le Prince left a lasting impact on the world of motion pictures and will forever be known, at least for me, as a visionary inventor. All the way at our number 7 spot, we have the murdered monks. The Abbaye de Montemeur is a 12th century monastery located in Normandy, France, and it is considered by many to be one of the most haunted places in the country as well. The story of Mortimer Abbey begins with the Cistercian monks who built the monastery on marshy land that was referred to as the Dead Pond, a name that would eventually become the moniker for the abbey itself. Despite the monastery's size and grandeur, it was often plagued by financial difficulties, which ultimately led to its downfall. By the time of the French Revolution, the abbey was in a state of disrepair, but a small community of monks still lived within its walls. However, their presence was not enough to save them from the wrath of the revolutionaries, who decided to storm the abbey in 1790, killing 4 monks who lived there and leaving a scene of blood and chaos behind. Since then, the abbey has been the site of numerous ghostly sightings, with rumors of ghostly monks haunting the ruins. Fortunately, there has even been accounts of a benevolent ghost there, dressed in the robes of a monk, appearing during World War II and even saving an English paratrooper from an enemy attack. And if you decide to visit, there's a higher chance you'll probably encounter one of the more angered spirits of the 4 murdered monks, but let's just hope you encounter this one. Number 6, the Mont Saint-Michel. The Mont Saint-Michel, a settlement located on the border of Brittany and Normandy, is a place of both beauty and terror. This majestic fortress built on an island is surrounded by the sea, which makes it a popular tourist destination, but this fairy tale-like location still has a dark and haunting side to it. According to the legend, the island was discovered when Saint Albert received a dream from Archangel Michael, directing him to build a monastery there. Despite initially disregarding the vision, the Archangel burned a hole in the bishop's head to reinforce the message, and the monastery was built. The island has been a place of worship and pilgrimage for centuries and has been the subject of many myths and ghost stories over the years as well. The island is known for their Battle of Mont Saint-Michel, one of the bloodiest days in French history. It is said that the wails of English soldiers who lost their lives during the war can still be heard on calm days with low tides. Many people believe that the souls of these soldiers are unable to rest and continue to haunt the island, never moving to the afterlife. Before the French Revolution, the island was inhabited by monks and other pious people who decided to bury their dead in the walls of the church. When the revolution reached Mont Saint-Michel, the monks were forced to abandon the island, and the abbey was then turned into a prison. Some say that the ghosts of the dead monks who were disturbed by the desecration of their once sacred location still roam the island as well. And the hump of our list, we have the Jack and Jill nursery rhyme. As you already know, nursery rhymes' origins aren't as charming as their true story. One of these is the Jack and Jill nursery rhyme. It has 2 popular interpretations. One is tied to the French Revolution, and the other one is tied to King Charles I of England. In the first interpretation, Jack represents King Louis XVI of France, and Jill represents Queen Mary Antoinette. The rhyme tells the story of their execution during the Reign of Terror in 1793. But in the second interpretation, the rhyme revolves around King Charles I's attempt to increase taxes on liquid measures. The standard volume of Jack was reduced and the tax remained the same. A gill, which was twice the volume of a Jack, was also reduced as a result. The volume mark on the standard Jack measure was indicated with a crown, and the reduction of the volume caused the crown mark to fall, leading to the lyrics, Jack fell down and broke his crown.
Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown, and Jill came tumbling after.
Number 4, the worst barber ever. Travel back in time to medieval Paris and the Ile de la Cite. when a barber was known to frequently receive foreign students who were housed by neighboring canons. Unfortunately, some of these young students would then vanish without a trace. In those days of widespread poverty and frequent attacks, it was believed that these students were victims of a violent crime, and with no family left in Paris to inquire about their disappearance, their fate was left to speculation. However, one day, an unusual incident changed the course of events. A dog was barking loudly in front of a barber's door for several days, and its master, a German student, had not returned from his appointment. The police were then called in to investigate and made a shocking discovery. The barber was cutting the throats of his young clients, then disposing of their bodies through a trap door in the cellar of the pastry chef next door. It was said that the pastry chef used the bodies to make some of the best pies in all of Paris. The barber and pastry chef paid the price for their crimes, and they were burned alive in a public square. Their houses were razed to the ground, and today the former site of the bakery is used as a garage for the Paris police. Number 3, the haunted lighthouse at Thévenet. Despite its picturesque location on the coast, the Thévenet lighthouse was notorious for the tales of madness and death that surrounded the 23 lighthouse operators who lived and worked there before it was automated in 1910. The area around the lighthouse has a rich maritime history and was known for their frequent shipwrecks that occurred there, including the crash of the French ship Sedusant during the Napoleonic Wars, which led to the death of hundreds of sailors. According to local legends, the area is also haunted by the spirits of the Celtic seafarers and warriors, who has been said to haunt the lighthouse since its inception. The tales of madness that befell the lighthouse operators are particularly eerie. The first operator, Henry Guzenick, was reportedly driven to madness by ghostly voices that spoke to him in the Breton language and told him to leave the lighthouse every single day. One of these successors are said to have had similar experiences, leading the French government to make Thévenet a two-man lighthouse and even recruited married couples to work there. However, few couples were willing to live and work at this lighthouse, for obvious reasons, and those that did suffered untimely and tragic deaths, including a family with 3 children and a cow.
Well, it's not relevant, is it?
The story surrounding the Thévenet lighthouse is filled with the tales of failed exorcisms, crucifixes installed to ward off evil spirits, and even a violent storm that arrived just as one of the operators were giving birth inside of the lighthouse. So definitely one of the places in France that you don't want to visit. Number 2, the encounter of Marius de Wilde. The French commune of Quaraubo made headlines in September 10, 1954, when a local railway worker named Marius de Wilde claimed to have been visited by extraterrestrials. According to the reports, de Wilde claimed that a cigar-shaped UFO landed near his garden, and 2 small creatures in spacesuits resembling dive costumes emerged. The UFO shot a beam of light that paralyzed de Wilde, and by the time he was recovered, the aliens are already getting ready to leave. Despite an investigation by the authorities that found unusual marks on the railway tracks, there was no concrete evidence of an alien encounter. The stories of de Wilde's experience with the extraterrestrials quickly was widespread and reached the wine-producing village of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, located hundreds of miles from Quaraubo. The local mayor and town council were keen to protect their citizens and vineyards from potential alien invaders, and as a result, they passed a municipal decree that banned all UFOs from landing, taking off, or flying over the community. Which is definitely strange, but I guess the UFOs listened, because ever since they made this decree, they haven't seen one since. Number 1, the ghost of Pont-Marie. The city of love is also the city of spine-chilling ghost stories, one of which stems from the era of France during World War II. This period saw the division of France into 2 parts, one directly occupied by the Germans and the other being a puppet state by them. However, amidst the hardship and turmoil, a brave woman rose to the occasion and joined the French resistance. This Parisian lady was married to a resistance fighter and was tasked with collecting information from an SS officer, with whom she started an affair. One fateful winter night, she was scheduled to meet her husband on Pont-Marie Bridge, which spans across the River Seine, but he ended up never arriving. Understanding that something was amiss, the woman wept, waiting through the nights until she eventually froze to death. Ever since, reports have surfaced of her ghost appearing on cold nights on this bridge, still crying and waiting for her husband to show up.
Starting off at number 10, Loch Ness Monster. Of course, Nessie has to come first.
From the beginning, it was Nessie who wanted me there.
Nessie? You nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster?
Almost everyone knows the story of the monster in the lake that people have been trying to spot for thousands of years. The first recorded spotting was in 565, but few have actually seen it. The world took an interest in this myth in the 1930s, when the first photograph was released claiming that this was the Loch Ness Monster. In 1933, Alec Campbell reported a sighting by Aldi McKay of what she believed to be Nessie. Mr. Campbell's report described a whale-like creature in the loch's waters, cascading and churning. Then in 1934, a British surgeon, Colonel Robert Wilson, claimed he took a photograph of the monster while driving along the northern shore of Loch Ness. I mean, we have only discovered like 5% of the water on Earth, so maybe there's something lurking deep down, but what do you guys think? Is she real? Is she all just a hoax? Now at number 9, Robin Hood. Legend has it Robin Hood was an outlaw living in the Sherwood Forest with his merry men. The first known literary reference to Robin Hood and his men was in 1377, and the Sloane manuscripts in the British Museum have an account of Robin's life, which states that he was born around 1160 in Lochsirlee in South Yorkshire. Robin became a popular folk hero because of his generosity to the poor and peasants, and his hatred of the sheriff who enforced the forest laws. Some date his adventures as taking place during Edward II, but other versions say the king was Richard I. Robin had fought in the Crusades alongside Richard I before returning to England to find his land had been seized by the sheriff, which he wasn't too happy about. Coming in at number 8, Grindylows. You know, kinda like in Harry Potter. I know, how many Harry Potter references am I gonna make on this channel? Holy! Grindylows are supernatural creatures that appear in the folklore of England, mostly the Lancaster area. They are described as small, non-human entities with scaly skin, a greenish complexion and sharp claws and teeth, and long arms with lengthy fingers at the end. They dwell in ponds and marshes waiting for unsuspecting children, which they then grab them with their strong grip and drag them into the waters. Grindylows have been used as shadowy figures to frighten children away from pools, marshes, or ponds where they could drown. Here at number 7, London Fog. On December 4th in 1952, smog began to cover London. The smog was present for 5 whole days and ended up leading to the passing of at least 4,000 people. On a regular Thursday afternoon, a high-pressure air mass stalled over the Thames River Valley. Suddenly, cold air came in from the west side, and the air in London became trapped. The problem worsened by the low temperatures, which caused people living there to burn extra coal in their furnaces to keep warm. The smoke, soot, and sulfur dioxide from the area's industries, along with the stuff from cars and consumer engine usage, caused heavy smog to smother the city. By the morning of December 5th, it was visible across hundreds of square miles. It became so thick and dense that by December 7th, there was no sunlight and visibility was down to only 5 yards in many places. Eventually, all transportation came to a halt, but not before the smog caused several train accidents, including a collision between 2 trains near London Bridge. However, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst effect of the smog was the respiratory distress it caused in humans and animals, including difficulty breathing and vomiting. A high number of people in the area, numbering in the thousands, passed away in their sleep that weekend. Now, it's a little crazy to me that all this happened and so many people ended up losing their lives. Taking our number 6 spot, Owlman. A small churchyard in Morton was a sacred spot long before the 13th century church was built there, with views over the Helford River. Sightings of a flying creature about 5 feet tall, half man, half owl, with glowing red eyes, silver feathers, and crab-like claws have terrified tourists since the 1970s. Oddly, all but one of the dozen or so eyewitnesses of the Owlman have been girls or young women, most under 16. So is this a creature that lurks the night, or is it a real person that wants to capture women and hurt them? Halfway at number 5, King Arthur and Excalibur. Still a relatively well-known myth, King Arthur and the Sword and the Stone is a myth of strength and honor. The legend goes that the magician Merlin placed the sword Excalibur in a stone, and whoever removed it would be the rightful king. Then Arthur removed it and went on to defend the country against invaders, along with many other heroic tales. King Arthur is a central figure in English history, and though some of the legends surrounding him may not be true, we do have centuries of literature, so I mean, in medieval times, this one doesn't seem too much of a stretch, but who knows. Number 4, Black Shuck, or Black Dog. The legend is perhaps the most common local myth in Britain. Among the graveyards, by crossroads, in the darkest forests, lurks a fear stirred first in the early medieval times. In Suffolk, this calf-sized hound with glowing red eyes is a harbinger of doom and death. It often appears during electrical storms, such as the one that struck both the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh on the same day at the exact same moment in August 1577. Leaving scorched claw marks on the church door at Blythburgh, and there were at least 2 fatalities. I mean, remember what I said about black dogs and top 10 TikToks that will make you question reality? Which, check out the video if you haven't already, but I mean, I don't know. I love black dogs, but still. Coming in at number 3, red caps. A red cap is a malicious and malevolent goblin creature. They are said to live in the ruined castles along the Scottish borders, murdering those who stray into their homes. They wear red hats that are dyed with their victims' blood. And to keep their hats red, they must hurt others regularly, because if they don't, they won't survive. You can't outrun a red cap and they will always catch you. I mean, go there and see if you can find one, but know that you have been warned. Here at number 2, the Nuclavi. It's said to be the most terrifying creature of Britain. Around the waters of Orkney lives a skinless human horse, a being of rage and pestilence. The Nuclavi has a head of a man, only much bigger. Some people speak of flippers on its legs. The sea-dwelling beast kills crops with its breath and makes livestock sick when it comes onto land, smelling of burning seaweed and set to exact revenge on any helpless soul unfortunate enough to witness its arrival. Like many British monsters, it's said that if you want to escape from its demonic presence, you need to leap across a freshwater stream or river. Taking our number 1 spot, Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper terrorized London in 1888, taking the lives of at least 5 women and disfiguring their bodies in an unusual manner, indicating that the killer had a very good knowledge of human anatomy. The culprit was never captured or even identified, and Jack the Ripper remains one of England's and the world's most infamous criminals. All 5 passings took place within a mile of each other, in or near the Whitechapel district of London's East End, from August 7th to September 10th, 1888. Now, despite having committed these heinous crimes and investigations claiming definitive evidence on their identity, his or her name and motive is still unknown.
At a number 10 spot, we have the Guantanamo's ghost prisoners. The military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, took its first 20 detainees in 2002. Despite various calls to shutter it, it still stands almost 20 years later. It was built in order to house prisoners captured in Afghanistan or other terrorists. At its peak, it housed just under 800 people, with many of the prisoners being detained without any sort of trial. In the early days of the detention camp, many of the prisoners were tortured physically and mentally. So this prison was the real deal and is in many movies and TV shows to this day, and you can probably see the depiction they do on it. Except after all the abuse, death, and injustice, the spirits have been said to be very aggressive in this prison. This is no surprise. Just doing my research on this place alone made me think, how could the US government create this prison in the first place? In short, it's a terrible place for terrible people. But since many were taken here without any sort of trial, I really wonder how many were innocent and actually ended up passing away in this very prison, knowing that they're innocent and they were treated the worst out of any prison in the world probably. At our number 9 spot, with the El Chupacabras. Imagine being in a world where a mysterious creature roams free and just wreaks havoc on livestock, especially when having livestock meant life or death. This is the world that people in Puerto Rico found themselves in during 1995, when the first reported sightings of the El Chupacabras were recorded. The name Chupacabras comes from the Spanish words chupar, which is to suck, and cabras, which is goat, which refers to its common depiction as blood-sucking reptile-like creatures with huge red eyes and sharp quills on its spine. This creature is said to stand 4 feet tall and be similar to a vampire, kangaroo, and wild dog all mashed together. Many people who claim to have seen it say that it's real, but others believe it's completely a legend. The first sighting of the Chupacabras was reported in Puerto Rico in 1995 when a local woman discovered dead livestock that had been drained of their blood. After this, reports of sightings started coming in from various parts of Puerto Rico and other countries, which included the Dominican Republic, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, El Salvador, Panama, Peru, and you name it. People claim to have seen the creature attacking and killing their livestock, and even some people reported seeing the creature itself. In 2011, a book called Tracking the Chupacabras was published by Benjamin Radford. Radford concluded that the eyewitness in the original Puerto Rican incident has based her description of the creature on a sci-fi horror film she had seen. After 5 years of investigation, Radford officially denied the existence of such creatures. However, many people still believe that the Chupacabras are real, and sightings did continue to surface afterward in 2018 and 2019. At a number 8 spot, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this is a time when the world almost ended, so this has to be a spot on this list. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis is considered to be one of the most intense 13 days of the Cold War, and this is because one single misstep could have meant a whole nuclear destruction all over the world. However, the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, the missile crisis began when US surveillance discovered what the Soviets sanctioned missiles in Cuba. And why did this scare Americans? Well, because Cuba is only 90 miles away from Florida, so the US debated whether to send an air raid or perhaps an invasion of Cuba in order to destroy these supposed missiles. After these intense 13 days of intense negotiations, with everyone a millimeter away from nuking one another, President John Kennedy and the Soviet leader were able to make a deal. To make this even more scarier, a Russian army officer named Vasily Arkhipov is considered to be the man who literally saved everyone on Earth. This is because on October 27, 1962, he was in a nuclear submarine when the US started to use non-lethals to bring their submarines up. They didn't know if this was an act of war, so they were just seconds away from launching a nuclear warhead when Vasily stood up to everyone and demanded not to send it out, possibly saving the entire human civilization. At a number 7 spot with Jaco Santino. The story begins when a traveling farmer who resided near Orkovis in the early 20th century. The man fished till late at night, and on his way home, he lit a jaco to light the way. Unfortunately, the jaco caught fire before the man arrived home. He went through his possessions and discovered a wooden crucifix among them. He lit up the crucifix and used it as a lantern because he was in desperate need of light. The man would die only a few days later after contracting a serious illness. Since he burned the cross, it is said that his spirit was condemned to stay on earth until he finds all the ashes of the sacred crucifix. So the legend says if you see a mysterious light floating around, it is the man with the jaco, and be sure not to disturb his search because they say he's a very aggressive spirit when provoked. At a number 6 spot with Jacinto's well. We're going to talk about a natural well, and from the looks of it, it seems like a nice tourist spot to take photos of, but locals claim a very tragic backstory instead. Back in the day, there was a supposed farmer by the name of Jacinto. Every day he would take his cows out to eat around that area because who wouldn't want to let their cows see this type of views? For some odd reason, Jacinto would ensure no cows would get out of line by using a rope and securing it around his own waist. Probably not the brightest idea in hindsight. This is because on one rainy night, Jacinto happened to be by this well when thunder startled one of his cows. The cow eventually ran into this well, bringing Jacinto down with him. Now it's said that if you go down to this well and shout out his names, the wave below will hit harder and higher. In the hump of our list, we have La Mano Peluda. The legend of La Mano Peluda is a spooky tale that can be heard in almost every Latin American country, but is especially popular in Mexico and Colombia. The story dates back to the Spanish Inquisition and has been passed down through generations of storytellers. The tale has many different versions, but most of them tell the story of a man who was wrongfully accused of a crime and had his hand cut off as punishment. This is when he swore revenge on everyone, and when he died, his hand came back seeking revenge. In the Mexican version of the story, the legend takes place in the year 1908 in Puebla. There was a man named Señor Villa who is known as Horta, and he and his wife, La Gangosa, owned a pawn shop. Horta was a terrible man who ripped off his customers and treated them very badly. After his death, a local newspaper ran a story that a graveyard keeper told them. The graveyard keeper claimed to see a black hairy hand with rings sticking out of Horta's grave. The hand would look for victims to tear out their eyeballs and choke them to death, then return back into Horta's grave. Since then, there has been many reports of people claiming to have seen this hand pulling them out of their bed while sleeping, and others have reported seeing it moving through the field searching for more victims. Other versions of this legend describe the hand as being black, hairy, with sharp nails twice the size of an adult's hand, all while leaving a trail of blood behind it. Maggots can also be seen moving around the hand, and the hand waits for children to get out of bed. At our number 4 spot, we have the Treasure of Lima. The Treasure of Lima is a fascinating legend of a buried treasure that was removed from Lima, Peru in 1820 and never recovered. The treasure is estimated to be worth up to $208 million in today's money. The treasure was originally collected by the Roman Catholic Church in Lima and was intended to be transported to Mexico for safekeeping during the Peruvian War of Independence. Captain William Thompson was put in charge of transporting the riches to Mexico, but he and his crew turned pirates and stole the treasure. They then buried it on Cocos Island off the coast of present-day Costa Rica. Thompson and his first mate were the only ones to survive out of the crew, and they agreed to lead the Spanish to the stolen treasure to save their lives. They took them as far as the Cocos Island and then managed to escape into the jungle. Thomas, the first mate, and the treasure were never seen again. Though it is believed that Thompson returned to Newfoundland with the aid of a whaling ship, Forbes settled in California and became a successful businessman, but never returned to the island. Since that time, hundreds of treasure hunters have traveled to the Cocos Island to find the Treasure of Lima, but none have succeeded and many have lost their lives attempted to find this supposed treasure. One theory is that the treasure was not buried on the Cocos Island at all, but on an unknown island off the coast of Central America. The Costa Rican government does not allow treasure hunting any longer and believes no treasure exists on this island, but people remain convinced. At number 3 spot, we have Duende. In Western Honduras, particularly in Copan Ruinas, there is a terrifying legend that has been passed down from generation to generation. The legend of the El Duende, the goblin. According to the Vejetos, or old folks, El Duende is an evil little man with dark skin who wears an elegant green suit and a big hat or a sombrero. He is said to only appear to single women, particularly on remote roads to rural villages or when women are alone in their houses. The legend goes that El Duende is an enamorado, a playboy who offers gifts and wealth to women in order to entice them to go away with him. Those who accept his offerings become enchanted by his evil powers and suffer consequences such as becoming mute or mentally impaired. If the women do not pay attention to the Duende, he chases them and throws rocks or cow dung at them. The Veto suggests that if El Duende appears to a woman, the best thing to do is to remain calm, act friendly, and ask him for something impossible, such as an open basket filled with water from a river. The frustration of not being able to fulfill such a request will cause the Duende to disappear and never to return to bother the woman again. Number 2, the house in Pinar del Rio. Although the date of when this house was built is unknown, what is known about it has been abandoned for over 20 years. This property is located right at kilometer 78 of the highway that connects Havana with Pinar del Rio. And every time someone decides to visit this abandoned house, they also come out reporting something very strange and sometimes supernatural. Former residents of the home have all left due to feeling uncomfortable in the house. For example, couples who have stayed slowly begin to argue more and more aggressively. Some have told others that it's impossible to sleep at night because of the constant nightmares you get while in this home. Meanwhile, the residents of this area claim to see strange lights coming from the inside and have seen wild dogs enter the house which are nowhere to be seen after. It is said that the house was originally built for a man named Juan, who is a very lonely man, and eventually the house would start to present supernatural activity once he started living in it. Soon after, he would then go deaf and would live inside of this house with these spirits as his friends. Since the man has passed, the spirits of this house are unwelcoming, and if you dare step foot, you may be putting you and your family's lives in danger. Number 1, Cementerio La Reina. This cemetery is essentially an outdoor crumbling art museum. This was a monument to plantation farming and wealthy trade barons when it first opened in 1800s. Most tombs are crowned with massive statues of beauty and grace. In recent years, the cemetery has fallen into disrepair and has been targeted by many grave robbers. Sleeping Beauty statue is one of the many statues that stands out to many visitors. The story goes that the young woman buried there was promised to an older wealthy plantation owner, but her heart belonged to a young local boy. When her wedding drew near, she ran off and married her true sweetheart. Unfortunately, she died soon after of cholera. Regardless of her betrayal, the older man buried her in the family space and erected a large statue that still stands today, a restless spirit in life and in death.